Good afternoon, everybody. At least it's afternoon here in Texas. And no, I'm not even drinking coffee. I'm drinking blueberry tea, caffeine-free blueberry tea. Brews up pretty nice. It's good. Man, that's delicious. I'm gonna do a video for you guys today about solar. I haven't done one in a while, but we're gonna do one right now. I'm gonna do another one right after this as well, on a different topic on solar. But right now, I want to cover some basic things, and I want to talk about a quote that another vlogger that I know had received. A company come out, they looked at his place, they gave him a quote on installing a system. They're in the Philippines. Now, I'm in the US and Texas right now, but for any of you that watch this that don't know, I live about half my year and sometimes more in the Philippines and then the rest here in Texas. And on both sides of the world, I'm running a solar system. My house there in the Philippines at the beach is 100% off grid right now with MPP solar system. I'm running Felicity batteries and all there as well. And I have a second system that is running a Renogy MPPT charge controller, and I'm running a 3000 watt standalone inverter with 110 voltage, the US voltage there as well, and I'm running that one on lead acid battery. So I have two different systems to my main system, which is two MPP solar inverters, hybrid charge controller inverter, two of them put into parallel. But that's not the one that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about this quote that a gentleman in the Philippines got there on Bohol Island, and let's go over it. So I've got some screenshots off of his video. So they come out and they did a site survey from this company there. I'm not going to put any names in none of this, by the way. All names are kept out of it. But a company came out, a local company, and they gave them a quote. And it looks like they put it, together, fairly professionally. They left some pretty important detail stuff out, but we'll go over that as we come to it. So what it says here is residential tailored 8.1 kilowatt off-grid solar PV system proposal. I'm really confused about the 8,000. Now, you can possibly buy two 4,000s and put those together in parallel. Not two independent systems. Now, the gentleman that they quoted this for, he thought maybe they're going to build two independent solar systems there, like say for instance like a 4,000 and a 4,000 or a 5,000 and a 3,000. But I don't think that's what they're doing. I really don't. But the fact is they didn't put that good detail in there into that quote. Now, here's the thing. Most of those inverters that come out of China and Taiwan and all, a lot of them are copies of each other. And in fact, a lot of times the components will be the same inside, and they may have a different style case or a different color. One will be green, one will be yellow, one will be white, one will be black, and one of them will have some fancy lines or a little different shaped case, but when you break it apart inside, pretty much the same inverter. I buy my stuff directly from MPP Solar, directly from the manufacturer, dealing with them one-on-one, no middleman at all for me. Now, we're going to go on this proposal here. It shows the system sizing. It says that proposes a 8.1 kilowatt. I don't get this 0.1. Single phase hybrid off-grid system. Well, it's not one inverter at 8.1 because that brand that they propose to sell doesn't sell a one single standalone unit at 8 or 8.1 kilowatts. That means you're going to be paralleling a couple units together. And I looked at their models. I went to their website. That particular brand is just a rebranding itself. It's underneath several different names. But I didn't find anything that you could parallel together and put it just to 8.1 and it be correctly installed. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Give them the benefit of the doubt. I could put 2 4s. I own 2 4s. They're rated that, but they'll peak on up higher than that. So that's why I said mine's really an 8,000 watt system, but it can peak up to 10. But just peak. That's briefly, you know, like a surge come through or something, like a induction motor starting up or something like that. So I'm really confused on that. And hybrid off-grid system. And it's going to have mounting and racking, of course. They didn't really detail the prices on that stuff in his proposal. And then it says module selection. The proposed system is using PERT mono solar for you, and it gives the brand panels and all that. Once again, they missed in the quote here telling how many of those panels that they're including that he's paying for. They didn't tell him. You know, are you getting 15 panels? Are you getting 18 panels? Are you getting 20 panels? They did not include that detail. So we're going to move on here to the next page of it. So then next is inverter selection. The proposed system is using single phase, you know, US, we are 2-phase, to 110 phases that are clocked out in a different oscillation. So Philippines is just one single phase. So you got 220, or it can be 230 volt. That voltage over floats anywhere from 200 to 230. It's kind of wild power over there, but one single phase. So for you here in North America, the outlets will look very similar or the same as our 110 outlet, which is a single phase, but they'll be putting out 200 to 230 volts in that same single phase. You can't go bring something that's 220 in the USA and think that you can plug it in the Philippines on 220. It's going to work. It's a whole different ball game on that. Let's continue on here. So a single phase SunPal inverter. Now I looked up that SunPal, and because it says right down here in little asterisk, SunPal inverter distributed by Solar for You Inc. only. Now that's not true. That's not true, because I can get online right this minute. So that SunPal inverter has other names as well. Of course, this one in the images, I can find them, but they're not an exclusive deal. They're not. They may want to tell you they're an exclusive deal, but they're not. You, me, any of us can get online and buy that product. We can go to Alibaba or many websites and find that product. It is not locked to no individual person or company or nothing like that. Maybe they want to portray it like that, but it's not true. So then let's move on here to the next part, which says deep cycle battery selection. So apparently they're going to sell SunPal's deep cycle sealed lead acid batteries, AGMs, absorbed glass mat batteries. They're right there on their website as well, and they're open for everybody to buy. But once again, they did not share the price or even the quantity in this quote of how many lead acid batteries they're putting in there. You know, are you putting 10? Are you putting 20? Are you putting 5? What are you putting? It's not included in the quote. And I priced these batteries, and by the time, I just tell you this, by the time you buy their absorbed glass mat batteries and you ship them, you're just as well to buy lithium that's going to last for years longer, that's going to offer more power. Let's just say this. Let's say a lead acid battery. Let's say it's a 100 amp hour battery. but you're not going to get 100 amp hours out of that battery because it only has a small range. It's of usable power in that battery. So you might as well call it a 50 amp hour, to where if you buy a lithium, for instance, like the ones that I'm using, which are lithium iron phosphate, you're going to get the bulk of all of that power out of it. It's really going to deliver you probably the full amount of that power. So you're going to have to buy a lot of lead acid batteries to get that power range. And then by the time you do that, let's say if you got to buy 4 lead acid batteries at 100 amp hours each, so there's going to be 400 amp hours, right? But you're only really going to get 200 amp hours out of it. So you wasted the money on the other 2 batteries. To where if you buy a lithium iron phosphate, for instance, LiFePO 4, as people call them and all, well, you're going to get your complete usage out of that battery. So you bought 4 batteries of lead acid to get what you can get out of 1 battery with the lithium iron phosphate, and you add that money together and the space and the weight, it don't make sense. A few years ago, when I first built my system, I couldn't find any lithium there in the Philippines. It was very hard and very, very expensive, super expensive. So then the scales were tilted a different direction, and the lead acid was still the better choice on a temporary measure, kind of like no other choice measure. But once I found a company that I could get them to ship those into me, and at a very affordable price compared to buying all that lead acid battery and maintenance and all on them. Now these are absorbed glass mat on these, so they don't require the maintenance like that, but you're still not getting much use out of them. And the life on them and the cycles is way less. You're going to get way less years for your money. Way less years. Right now, my system over there is going every day. How long we've been here in the U.S. right now? Almost 6 months. And the family's there using all kinds of stuff. Our little apartment in there, stuff's still all running. And every day, day in, day out, night and day, that solar system's there running, and it's never had a hiccup. Going just smooth as pie. I can see my batteries, I can see my system on security cam there, and I've got a camera right at the display and at the batteries. I never even see them get low. It just runs smooth as pie. That's what you want. You don't want to have to be working on your power all the time to have power. Lead acid, you're going to have to give it some attention, and you're still going to have corrosion issues and things like that too. Corrosion at your cables, your connections, it's a pain in the butt. Just tell you the truth, pain in the butt. And they're very sensitive, and you can knock a battery out pretty easy. So let's move on. They didn't tell how many batteries, so he's in the dark on that. Just tell him what is an off-grid system. Well, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that. Now, I could tell that the gentleman they did this quote for was a little confused on what is an off-grid system and what is a grid tie system. Now, you can have off-grid. We can have off-grid with a grid tie as a backup. All right, so let's split the screen here, and let's say over here, you got completely off-grid. There's no other power source coming from utilities. You've got off-grid that you've got a backup power source that can still switch over, charge your batteries, and run your items in your house if you have no solar, cloudy day, nighttime, and your batteries are low. Now, that's still all in the off-grid category. Then you got your full grid tie and net metering. Now, that is different. The one that's grid tied here with an off-grid is just, it don't ever put any power out to the grid. It can only borrow power in, and you're going to, pay for that electricity. It's going to come through your meter, and it's just like a backup for you. Had stopped the camera for a second. Our Filipino neighbor came over, and she said a Vietnamese lady cooked these little treats. They're little round treats with durian inside. We don't know the name of them, but that's with durian. I don't know if any of you guys like durian or not. It's a big fruit, looks similar to a jackfruit, but really potent smell and taste. And it's like horrible smell, but tastes so good. It's got to be something you really, um, you're going to know if you like it or not instantly. Some people can not stand durian at all and just despise it. And I don't know, I like it. So thank you, Ate, for bringing over treats while I'm doing a video. So good. So good. All right. So we were talking about the off-grid system. So we covered about what off-grid is. Standalone, it can use the grid as a backup power if you don't have enough battery storage or your solar's not putting out, so you're not just in the dark. And then you've got grid tie net metering. Now, grid tie net metering can put power back onto the grid. You have to get with your utility company. You have to go through an approval inspection process and all. If you are with a utility or power company that even allows net metering, some don't. Some don't, like even here in the U.S. Encore, that's in my area right here, does, but just right a half a mile that way is a different power company, which is like Farmers Co-op, and a lot of your co-ops don't do net metering, so you know, you're out of luck on that. A lot of power companies in the Philippines do net metering. Now, here is the thing about a net metering grid tied solar system. It's not going to, unless something's changed and I'm in the dark about it. And if I am, correct me. But as far as I know, if you run a grid tie system with net metering and the grid goes down, you go down, because they can't have your system pumping power out onto the lines. And let's say a line's down and a lineman needs to put that power line back up, and they switch off the line in that whole area so that they can get a connection made back up. So your lineman's up there working on that. He touches it and, you know, because they thought it was dead, but you know, old Joe over here with his grid tied system, if it was able to put power out with the grid down, he would still be pumping energy on the line and hurt somebody. So far as I know, unless I'm wrong and something's changed, and I don't think it has, if you put in a net metering system, that system, when the grid goes down, you go down. It turns your inverter off so that you don't put power out onto the grid and hurt somebody if they're having to service the lines. And that is a downfall of a grid tie system. What has it done for you with a power outage? Nothing. You're still without power. You are only having less of a power bill when the grid's going. That's all it's done for you, is gave you a smaller bill while the grid's going. But when the grid goes down, or like in the Philippines, the scheduled brownouts, you're still without power. That system's doing nothing for you whatsoever. So that's the downside of a net metering grid tie system. But you can still have an off-grid system, like I say, that has a connection coming in from your power source, but it does not pump no power out. It only allows power to come in. There's no back feeding, okay? So I hope that'll help the person that this quote's for, and help all of you out as well to maybe better understand that. So let's just read what they have right here, though, for their information. An off-grid solar PV, also known as a standalone PV system, provides grid-like electricity in areas where the grid power is either unavailable or unreliable. As the name suggests, it is in no way connected to your local utility company's electrical grid. Now see, that's where I can disagree right off the bat, because you can connect it. but only power in, you know, just like if you were charging a battery with your battery charger, you know. So, but it's not going to backfeed. So they're a little wrong on that, because these particular inverters they're trying to sell him does offer, you know, just like mine do, to be backed up by the grid. So it's really wrong to say it's no way connected to your local utilities company's electrical grid, and thus requires battery storage in order to provide power to the house when there is no power by the solar PV system. And see, that's not really true. It's just not really true. Then it says an off-grid solar PV system without battery storage can only provide power to the house when the sun is shining. I want to tell you, those systems that they're putting out there, that the inverter's only working when the sun's shining, it is horrible, horrible, horrible. I wouldn't waste my time with one of those for nothing. You have no battery storage. Well, a cloud goes over. Let's say your solar panels are out there and they're putting out 3,000 watts. You know, according to how many panels you have. Let's say they're putting out 3,000 watts, boy, and you know your refrigerator's going, your TV's going, your little air con's going. Life is good. And a cloud comes over. And now they're putting out 700 watts. And your air conditioner is trying to run, and your refrigerator is trying to run, your TV's trying to run, and the inverter just shuts off. It just shuts off because it's overloaded. It's don't have that 3,000 watts still pumping in. You know, it may have 300 or 700, and you're trying to pull 18 or 2,500 watts of power at that moment, and one little cloud come over and it shuts it off. Then that cloud passes by, the inverter resets, the power's back up strong again, it's back up making 2,700 watts or something, you know, and then all's back going again. You know, your compressor's done cycled and all that on your air conditioner, and it resets itself. It starts going again. Another cloud comes through. Boop, off again. No, that's nonsense. So you want a system that your batteries can make up for those ups and downs with your solar panels. The battery keeps it smoothed out, picks it up like, oh, well, I'm only down to 1,200 watts now, but we need 18, so I'm going to pull the additional over here from the batteries for the next little bit until the power peaks back up again. Those batteryless systems are horrible, horrible. Don't waste your money on one of those. All right, let's continue on. And so then it says right here that you can be less dependent from utility. True. Brownout protection. True. And no electric bill. That's, I'll be honest, I would stay tied to the grid. There in the Philippines, maybe you're going to be out $5, $6, $7 for the grid still being tied to your house. Something happens, you need that power. Maybe you're going to service your solar panels. Maybe you need to unplug and hook some stuff for a while, or service your batteries or anything. You can, or maybe you need more power than you can produce, and you can use some for the grid to fill the gap. And for that few dollars, it's worth it. Cons is a higher initial capital cost, and then it says here limited solar energy storage and no access to grid power. And that's not true, because you can still have access to grid power. So it's just a bad statement, a bad quote. Scope of the work or what they're going to do, I'm just going to skip over that. Permits and registration. Now, I could tell there was a little bit of confusion with this gentleman on that. He does not need to go get permits and registration unless he's doing a grid tied, putting net metering, putting power out, like it says right there, net metering compliance. If it's an off-grid, and it's an off-grid with just the utility as a backup, you do not need any type of permit or registration for that. But if you're going to do a grid tie, that you're going to put power back out onto the lines, your surplus, You're going to need to go through all the rules, regulations, inspections, and probably more equipment. I wouldn't do it. Personally, I wouldn't do it. So, so we're just going to skip on past all of that right there. Now, let's talk about this price now. This is what got me, is this price. I'm just going to tell you flat out how this is, because I know these prices out of my head. The price they're quoting him there, I don't know what they're paying for equipment. Maybe they're paying more than I do. Maybe they're paying less. But I know what I pay for equipment, and I'm just the individual Joe Blow over there, okay? Here and over there. And I can build that system for half the price of what they're quoting here, for half the cost. Those inverters, 2 of those inverters, you're going to be out maybe $650, $700, you know, for 2 of them. If you know how to buy them properly and you know where to buy them properly. The solar panels, they're not that expensive, and they're pretty readily available in the Philippines. They really are. You can even get on Facebook Marketplace. There's individuals selling them all over the place. PV cable, that's pretty readily available too, or you can get online and order it. You can get it on Lazada, and if you don't know Lazada, that's kind of like Amazon in the Philippines. Kind of like, not as good, but kind of like. But it's a local company based out, I think, Singapore, and they're all throughout Southeast Asia. But you can find, you know, the PV cable and the MC4 connectors and all of that, combiners, anything you need. But you need to know the working knowledge of how to properly connect that stuff. But you know, you can do it. You can do it. You absolutely can. If it's going to save you $6,000 to $8,000, I'll figure it out. You know what I'm saying? But some people don't want to mess with it. Some people are really scared of dealing with electricity. And you just need to know a few basic things to know how to properly connect your solar panels together. Now, I do want to say this. The gentleman that this was quoted for, apparently he's had a little bit of solar system before in the United States, but maybe a long time ago, and some different type of equipment than what's common right now. Because he was telling me he had wind and solar combined together before. And they did sell equipment back in the day that was more of a, not a digital or MPPT, but more of a basic analog type system that you would have one controller box, charge controller box. Now this wasn't a hybrid all built in one box. It's component. And they would have for solar charging and wind both coming in, and it would do a dump. It had some, you know, manual relays in it that would click, and it would send it over to a deal like a heating element that would burn up that excess power and keep your wind generator from up there freewheeling and burning up and things like that. But keep from overcharging your batteries. It would dump and burn up the excess energy. It's pretty inefficient, you know. You really don't want to be burning up your additional energy there. But the newer equipment is a little bit more high-tech than that, and a lot of your wind stuff is still using that type, but your solar is way more efficient now. When you do this, you need to do it in a correct and professional manner. You need to use the proper connectors that are properly crimped and stripped, soldered if they need to be to keep corrosion down, and not none of this twisting wires together, total mayhem type stuff. If you want a really good, reliable system. But you can buy all that stuff. You can buy the little simple toolkit. You can buy PV cable. You can buy MC4 connectors. You can get it all right there online, shipped right to your house. So it's something that you can do. You can do it yourself, but just do it properly. Put the right type connectors and stuff. It's got O-rings in them, keeps the moisture out, keeps corrosion out. Do it correctly. Then the next thing, you're going to need to know the ratings on your inverter. You can have a whole bunch of solar panels, but how you connect those panels together is very important. Some people will just run them all in a parallel, just all in a parallel. And so you're never raising the voltage, you're just bringing in a whole lot more watts or equals to amps coming in. For that, you're going to need a pretty big cable coming from where they all combine together, going to your hybrid charge controller inverter. You're going to spend more money. Those cables are going to have to be bigger to carry all that. Or if you know how to run some of them in parallel and then connect those parallels into a series, then you can run a smaller cable and further away from your house or location to get away from some trees or things like that that's going to shade the panels. So then that's going to be another thing. You're going to need to realize that shading your panels is going to drop the power across the panels unless you have the proper equipment to avoid it doing that. Now, his house is around a place that there's a lot of trees. Now, they've cut a lot of trees, but there's still a lot of trees. And if you've got these 2 or 3 panels over here being shaded, it's going to bring the power down on a bunch of the other panels unless you have the proper equipment to avoid it from doing that. Some you're going to use micro inverters that can avoid that. That's more of an expensive solar system. Another way is diodes, and that can help on that. Like I use a PV combiner box, and it already has the diodes built in it that keeps the backfeeding of your strong panels going to the weak panels and sucking the power down on the whole system. So if you cannot keep all your panels 100% out in the sun and no shading on any of them, and I mean no shading, not even a pole sticking up putting shade across them. No shading means no shading. Well, then you're going to need to know how to properly connect them so those that may catch some shade part of the day don't pull the whole system down. And it's those things that you're paying these guys to do in that money, but I wouldn't say $6,000 worth or $7,000 or $8,000 worth of know how to do. It's not that difficult. It's pretty simple, just to tell you the truth. Let's move on here. He's got an installment plan here. I wouldn't do it. That kind of money, I just wouldn't do it. It's just not worth it. Right here, this Revo VM2 series off-grid energy storage inverter. This inverter, it's common. It's easy to find. They're all out there everywhere. A lot of them are all copying from each other. They all say they're original company and they're not. It's just a whole bunch of mess. And so there's nothing more special about this inverter than a bunch of others. It's no more special than even my MPP Solar, but at least mine are original MPP Solar and not these copycat clones that they were selling out there, still in their name or still in their design. And there's a lot of that out there. Read the specs on it. It's a decent, it's a decent enough little unit. It's showing the hybrid operation there. Pretty simple. This right here is probably the most important thing that you need to know. This sheet right here, if you're going to build this system yourself, this is going to be your most important sheet, and that is knowing the power of how this thing can handle how much voltage coming in from your solar panels. The maximum is you can't just put an infinite amount of panels on one of these. You've got to pair it up properly, and you cannot just bring the voltage up as high as you want. This one actually did have a pretty good rating on how high the voltage can be done on your input on your PV. These are the gel 200 amp hour batteries. They're just a waste of money. I would not buy those. I just wouldn't do it. No way. No way. Well, bottom line is, if he could do it himself, if he could, he could save half that money. He could save half of it. I mean, half of that money is a lot of money. You're paying them a lot. They don't break down the itemized equipment. They don't tell about if he's going to have any DC breakers, if he's going to have a PV isolator. You know, they don't break down the other components they're actually going to put there, which is some pretty important components. But even with all those components, they're cheap. You know, those breakers, you might be out for the box and a big DC breaker, you know, all of it together, $100, you know. So it's not like these are big high ticket items that is hidden away in there that you don't realize. Those mounting rails, they're, you know, a couple $100 there in the Philippines. I bought them. They're not expensive for mounting your solar panels on. You might have $400 worth of mounting rails for your PV panels. So yeah, that's why I wanted to share on that and do a little breakdown on his system. But them trying to say that it's exclusive to them, it's not. I would say for Philippine prices to make that kind of profit, that they're hitting it pretty hard there. There was a pretty high quote. That's my opinion. This is all my opinion. They may feel different. They may not be getting a very good price. They may need me as a purchase manager for them. Honestly. But it sounds like they're definitely going to make a good old profit. Now, if you're scared of doing the system yourself and you just want to spin that out and be done with it and pay these guys to come do it, you know, hey, I understand 100%. Well, that's what I want to talk about on this, and I appreciate you all hearing me out, and I hope that he makes a good decision on the system. I myself, if it was me, I would buy one of those inverters or two. I would just go ahead and buy two inverters and buy some solar panels and get you, go ahead right from the start and buy you a couple lithium batteries and start out a small system that can be expandable. Even if you have two inverters, you can just use one and have the other one there ready to go as a backup, which is what we're doing right now. That is exactly what we're doing. All right, everybody, I just hope this may help out a little bit, shine a little light on a few things, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.